Go
All right,
ahead.
salute omnes, John Magister Ricard from living from Latin Fluency. We're gonna be almost a living Latin live, but we're not doing a show like that tonight. So I'm meeting here with a former student of mine, Ryan Felberbaum, aka Lucius, who was a student of mine several years ago now. Ryan, what year did you graduate from Pinecrest again?
2018? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I couldn't remember. It seemed like yesterday.
Yeah.
But so Ryan was one of my former lab students. I had the privilege of teaching, and he's been involved in a very exciting project as he's gone on to college, Columbia there in Chicago, and has kind of entered into the video game industry. And he's now releasing they're releasing a project that they've been working on. Wanted to take a moment to meet with him and have him talk about it and how it relates to his Latin studies back in the day. And back when I knew him back when. So Ryan, go ahead and tell us what is the project you're working on? Let's plug it. Let's get a lot of people on there, and it's gotta go from there. So
Yeah. I'm working on a VR video game called Escape from Hadrian's Wall. So Hadrian's Wall, obviously Hadrian, Rome. There we go. There's the connection already. You can tell. But it's a VR game, escape room, puzzle. There's card battling. So it's a little bit of a few things. It's a debut title from a company called Jim Gray Productions, started by a guy named Jim Gray. He actually worked at Industrial Light and Magic, so like Lucas Films. So he's also worked on Call of Duties and tons of stuff. So pretty much he worked on a bunch of games throughout his life, had a full career, and said, I want to make my own stuff. I want to make what I want to play, what I want my kids to play, what I want the generations to play. So this is his debut title. I was actually the third member on the team. Um, so I was actually hired by or recommended by my mentor, Paul Stoughton. Shout out to him and Penguin Grenade. We talk about that later. Because they worked together at I think either Call of Duty or Skywalker, one of the two. They interacted somewhere. But I was the third. I helped work on a prototype of theirs to see like, is this going to be a thing? And then once we got a full playable prototype, we start work on a full game. And right now we have a demo. The game's not coming out till sometime next year, but we have a full demo releasing, which is about a third of the story of the game and a bunch of the puzzles and stuff coming out mid-October of I think October 16th. And I also so what did I do on the project? I was the sound designer, so I made all the sound effects. I was also the composer, so I got to play around. I made all the music. And yes, I did get some awesome Roman instruments. So we can talk about that later.
nice. Yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to ask about was first of all, I guess why Hadrian's Wall? I assume that Jim Gray kind of said this is the project, this is what I want to do. Why was that kind of I guess, the backdrop for the video game? What do you
Yeah,
know about that?
so I don't know the exact story. I can't remember. I know he definitely told me why, but he picked it because he thought so the game takes place in 402 AD, so it's end of the Roman Empire is a shadow of itself. It's the end times. And it takes
In the
place,
West.
yeah. The true Roman Empire.
Yes.
So it takes place in so you're a prisoner. You're not a you're the Romans are the bad guys. Um, I can't spoil too much, but the Romans for the most part are
Right.
not on your side. But why he picked Hadrian's Wall? I mean, it's just an interesting concept because we're not in Rome, we're in England. Um, I,
Frontier.
I just remembered the reason why he picked it, and I can't say because it has to do with the main story.
Right.
But that's a lot of spoilers and not everything's announced. But there's a connection to mythology, and there's actually a lot of influence. It's not just ancient. It's not just Rome. There's also Britain. There's a bit of Persia. There's Jewish mythology. There's actually a lot of stuff. But for the
Okay.
most part, to answer your question, is it's interesting. It's a cool setting. There's prisons, it's huge, and it actually opened up a ton of doors for us to really design a really cool game with cool set pieces, cool escape rooms, but also like there's a bunch of awesome puzzles that have to do with Rome and all sorts of cool things.
Okay. So I mean, for me, it's a very interesting concept because the setting, like you said, it's on the frontier of the Roman the Roman Empire there in Hadrian's Wall.
Yeah.
It's a very obviously, observable Roman artifact that's still extant. Like people still can visit it, that kind of thing. So I think it's a really cool setting, and I don't think a lot's been done in terms of video games. I don't think a lot's been done on that.
Rome is
Personally,
already, it's
yeah,
already
I
an
was gonna say,
unpopular. It's already not a super popular thing, but especially in VR, I know there's a couple Gladiator games. Actually, I remember there's a couple of them that came out at the beginning of VR things, and I remember telling you about it when I was in your class.
yeah,
But
yeah.
this one, yeah, you're not. It's like obviously that's the first thing a lot of people think when they think of Rome, but this is like no, you're exploring the dungeons and the interior workings of Hadrian's Wall. Now, I will say it is a fantasy game. There's a lot of leeway of fantastical stuff that happens, and I say emphasis on a lot. But for the most part, yeah, that is the backing is Hadrian's Wall.
So that's actually something I think is important. Like me personally, classically educated, did archaeology, that whole thing. When I see stuff that comes out about the ancient world and Rome in particular, I don't get my toga in a knot over whether it's historically accurate or not. I'm just excited that we have the subject matter to kind of work from. If it's inspired from it or it's a very detailed kind of academic study, even, great. But I still think that, like you said, the appeal's there. So kind of building into that. So how much of the like prison, let's say, kind of aspect was kind of brought in from ancient Rome? Because I honestly, if you ask me, as a Roman, a Latinist, what do you know about Roman prisons? I can say I don't know anything. I just know the Latin word for it, but honestly, I don't really know a whole lot. So, what did you guys kind of? What was your? I guess what was your target, right? What were you trying to do with it, and what did you guys find out?
So for the most part, so you're not in a prison for too long. It starts in a prison. There isn't much of the historical element in the setting in terms of realism, but in terms of but it's a video game. It's not all about being realistic. It's more of the aesthetics of like, yeah, we're in a fantasy pre-medieval time of because very fast, not to spoil too much, but
Right.
you are actually, you know what? It's in the trailer. It's in the teaser trailer, so I can say it. The prison is the very first scene in the teaser trailer. Um, and which it's the same level too. Like we use the same exact assets that's in engine, which is really cool. And pretty much there's a magical wall that's the very first puzzle in the game, and the teaser trailer is a fake version of the puzzle, so there's no spoilers. But you immediately open it up and you use these really cool magical goggles and all this stuff that like pretty much show that there's this entire this this mage that is forcefully working for the Romans. I don't want to as I think a medic or something, but she's secretly working against them but she's a mage, so there's tons of she pretty much built a magical laboratory and labyrinth within the walls of Hadrian's Wall under the noses of the Romans. They have no idea what's going on. And the story of the game is pretty much you are a prisoner, outside forces are besieging the wall. You gotta escape. Obviously, it's the name of the game. However, uh, when the game opens across from the cell, there's a woman named Adhan who has a brand new newborn baby that she had with one of the guards. And the guards, he's a Roman guard. His name is Marius.
Oh, good,
And
good name.
yeah. And he is a not the Romans they're onto him. So he has to not only make sure that he's safe, but make sure that his wife and the child are safe. And
He's
this
a
is
child.
Christianity is now so a big point of this game is one of the big conflicts is you have the Roman paganism and Christianity is getting really popular, and it's actually a big point of a test of between Adhan, who wants the big thing at the beginning of the game is you need to get the child baptized. She's not leaving this wall until the priest that they have baptizes this child. I can't say anything more, but that's a big point of the game. So you are having to help reunite with Adhan as she to get to the priest named Blaze to get him to baptize the child. Marius doesn't really care. He's like, nah. And Outhand's like, Marius is like, I want you and the baby safe. She's like, not without a baptism. It's a big dramatic point later on that it's an argument they have throughout the game. But you're in the cell over, and Marius sees that. So once they escape and the war settles down for a little bit, Marius is like, hey, you, come help us. So as you do that, a magical realm opens and you're exploring the world. And it's you'll have to play and see. There
Yeah,
is
that's a rich, I think, tapestry for a setup, and that is like early Christianity, also kind of paganism. I don't know if you remember, but in Lingua Latina per se Illustrata, that book we would read, the orange and white book with
yeah,
Hans Ober, it was all in Latin. The slave character Nat Medus is actually trying to escape with his girlfriend, and at the same time, uh, her name Louis is her name if I remember correctly. But anyway, she's a Christian and he's not, and so he's actually asking her about like, what is this book you're carrying, which is the Bible, and he's like, who is this God you're praying to? And it's Jesus, and trying to like calm the water. So it's an interesting kind of tapestry to kind of see the kind of the mixture, right, of the Christian kind of onset as a belief system, in some ways replacing the pagan beliefs that were there. So on the frontiers, that would make sense. We have this kind of conflict between the Roman imperial presence and trying to establish Roman style order, and then you have this the resistance movement, if you will. So Autumn, I assume, is part of that resistance movement. So
yeah.
it's almost like
Obviously, and she was jailed
Shakespeare.
for it. So um
Yeah, so that's an interesting dynamic. And so your character is just kind of circumstantially there and has to get pulled into helping her survive, the baby survive, and at the same time, like
it's a classic.
you've got this.
You help us, we help you.
Right, and then of course you got the Romans and you got the other forces trying to battle it out, and you're just trying to work your way through that situation. That's a pretty good story. I mean that sounds pretty awesome because it reminds me a lot of other movies and other kind of materials, like The Eagle, for example. I remember that movie, but it was originally a book, which kind of talks about British Rome and the Roman presence in Britain and what that meant. Of course, losing the eagle, the standard itself, the military
Yeah.
eagle, and how that was something. So that's a very interesting kind of storyline, I think, to pick up from. Now, why? So, kind of talk about maybe the mechanics. As you mentioned, escape room and puzzles. Why that, and maybe not? I mean, I don't know. Maybe this is a part of it, but you've got kind of your sword and sandal kind of epic genre. So why the escape room puzzle avenue as opposed to kind of a hacking and slashing kind of
Yeah.
video game?
I think the main point that Jim wanted was this is a family game. This is for everybody. Obviously little kids aren't going to play this game. It's not for them. They might be a little bit too hard.
Right.
But it is he wanted it to be for like I think hold on one moment. Let me get the tagline for his production company for Jim Gray Production
Right.
is which kind of it encompasses exactly his philosophy of gaming. Of course, it's taking forever to load, but I'll say that as it loads, is it's for everybody, and at the end of the day, we wanted this game isn't a reaction time based game. You can play this game and
Right.
take as long as you want. It's a game to think, take your time. I don't want to say relax. It's not a stressful game. There are battles. There is violence, kind of. There are monster battles. You build these golems, elemental golems to fight using cards that are magic spells. But it's card based. That was the child of or that was the from the mind of the second there our head gameplay engineer Dylan Blair, also from ILM and Call of Duty and a bunch of other awesome stuff. Genius guy, and his baby was this awesome, really complex card system. The tagline of the company is multi-generational games for a multi-generational planet.
Wow. Okay.
So this is a
That's
game that he wants to, everyone should be able to play over generations. And maybe fighting games, not everyone can play a fighting game. It requires reaction times. It requires a certain mindset of you're fighting things. Versus this, ours is an escape room. It's I don't want to say it's like an escape room as like a modern like,
Right.
you're not timed. But it's very interactable puzzles that since you're in VR, you're grabbing things, you're pouring liquids, you're opening books. We have an instrument that you play. It's a psaltery that you play that there's magical notes that you have to find that's what
Hmm.
opens the next door. You get a magic wands that you can shoot fire and water from and ignite torches, and all sorts of really cool things. So it's mainly that, yeah, this game is it's supposed to be for a wider audience, but also, um, yeah, combat is that kind of game. It's just a different genre. It's like any other game genre.
Well, I think that you're touching on something I think is extremely important, and that is, as myself being a father, and Connor's now 9 years old, if you can imagine that. Him playing video games, he wants to bring me in, so we'll play games like Minecraft or something. But when it comes to actually playing games, I try to steer them away from those, like you said, reactionary, violent driven games where the mechanics are essentially violence and eliminating people, right? Obviously, that's in Minecraft, for example, if you play like on a server or something. But the idea of building something or trying to solve a puzzle, right? I think that that is very good approach to have, like you said, a multi-generational aspect of things. Where, because one of the things I think that we're critical of games of, at least in society in general now, is that they're almost segregating people into their individualized kind of fantasy bubbles, right? But if you bring them a game that requires them to use their brain and solve puzzles, and they work as a team, now you've got a completely different dynamic. I think.
It's filtering out the voice, but yeah, no,
Oh,
that's the entire concept. I heard what you said. It filtered, but yeah, pretty
yeah,
much. But yeah, it's a game for that. Obviously, it's not for everybody because not everyone likes puzzle games. But it's VR is such an awesome, unique media. It's a brand new medium. Like it's the next level. It's like like it came out like probably it was when I was with. I remember buying a headset and being like, "We this is the coolest thing ever." When they were
yes.
first coming out. So 9 years ago, when they were first becoming a thing, and I'm like, "Oh my God, like this is the next generation." And has it completely gotten like full steam ahead as everyone have a VR headset? No. However, it is a completely different form of interactivity to an entirely new level, and especially for someone that has to work on a VR game, especially doing sounds, it's a completely different workflow too, which is a whole other
Well, I
conversation.
was to build on your point because shout out to you, right? When in our class many years ago, you were instrumental in getting a VR system in our Latin class where we were going to try and just kind of experiment with the idea of having a world that students could walk around in and interact and kind of communicate in Latin or interact in some form. But the technology wasn't really there. It was kind of in its infancy, and this is, I don't know, what, 8, 10 years ago.
Now
But
you can like the headsets
now,
we use, like the Meta Quest, which is what I use and what we originally used
right?
to make the game on, which is what we're all using to make the game on, and like it's for multiple platforms. Um, it's you don't need a computer. It's just a headset. Now it has
Yeah,
a battery life, but it's just a
right.
headset. Like it can run.
Now, that's what I was going to ask. Okay, so is the game so? And this is my ignorance showing, so correct me. But when you put on the headset, is there a way to put on multiple headsets at one time so people can collaborate, or is it just kind of
It's a
you're on
single
your
player
own?
game. So this is a
Okay,
one person playing the game and you're just going through it.
right. Because that. I mean, that might be something neat to go down the road. But that's one of the things I think is really cool about VR. I just like I told you before we got on here today, I was playing some VR with Connor's at a friend's birthday party today, and just the idea of having a 3 dimensional space to interact. I mean, we've all seen the videos of people online tripping over their couches and hitting their TVs. That aside, the idea of that as a medium for driving video games, right, is I think amazing because it does require a different maybe understanding of what we're trying to do. So if it's just a reaction based hack 'em kind of game, that's going to get tiresome and boring in some sense, or it's going to be repetitive. But when you have to actually use your mind and solve puzzles, and you got a bit of a horror aspect to it too, that there's feedback that, oh, I should have done that. That's bad. That's going to hit you. I think that makes it even more exciting.
VR is especially is really hard to develop for because since it's a virtual reality, you have to, unlike a 2D, a flat game, a normal game, where there's X amount of buttons, you move one button is just you move your character and you typically know if you can click something or not. It's pretty obvious. You press X, you click it. But in VR, you have no idea. Who knows what like you can actually interact. Typically, if we have any objects that are just scattered throughout, you should be able to pick them up and move them, or otherwise people are going to be like, well, why can't I pick this up? Same thing in VR. It's like, and it's or for our game specifically, it's like you have all these tools, and I have the wands here. You have when you're using the game, when you're playing the game, it's like you get this like in a normal game. Let's say you pick up an item like the instrument that we have in the game. You press one button and it plays. In this game, like when we were doing play testers and they don't know how to play the instrument. Some people were trying to strum it. Some people didn't know which tool to use. Actually, like it's a hammer that you play the strings. They didn't. Some people didn't know it was an instrument. So there's just this extra level of interactivity that you just immersion is the perfect word to use. It's a very overused word in gaming, but it is so just true because you then forget you're in VR, but then the suspension of disbelief goes away the second you do something you can't do. Second, something isn't right.
Right.
It's up to the game developers to make sure you can do everything you should be able to do. Which is why we
Yeah,
get
and I
tons of
mean that.
feedback. We get tons of feedback like, oh well, I use this thing. We use a torch to light, but I have a magic wand that shoots fire. Why can't I use that to light it? And we're all like, huh, good thing. Or you get a magic potion. Why can't I drink it? Which we added some Easter eggs, which I want to get on later. I had some. I want to do a Roman Easter egg, a Roman history Easter egg. I'll mentally note that because I want to mention it. It didn't end up in the game, but I want to tell you about it because it's hilarious.
Yeah, that's cool because that creates a whole another level of, I mean, interaction, like you're saying. So one of the things I'm playing around with these days, AI, of course, everybody's messing around with it. And one of the things I've learned is there's a guy who's I was watching talk about AI and it's implementing it. And he says, look, you have immersion, then you have application, right? So you get immersed in something a lot, and then you figure out the application part. And it's almost like this step thing where you do some immersion, you get application, do another immersion, application. What you're describing is kind of that idea that you get immersed in the world, you kind of figure out the mechanics a little bit, and then you have an application for it. Now, the complexity you just described to me that's interesting is how do you prevent people from hacking stuff? Like, I'm going to do this, and it's going to have this crazy mechanic that wasn't intended right inside the game. I mean, you
A
know
lot
all
of
about, yeah,
we are constantly playing. If I'm not, I probably play through the game 100 times a day, and
yeah,
we have a dedicated quality assurance guy, an awesome guy named Zeke who, uh, that's all he does. He does constantly. He's playing the game, and we're saying, all right, play it until you break it. I'm constantly when I put a sound in because it's not as easy as drag sound file in the game. Obviously,
right.
it's way more complicated than that. There's programming involved. Sometimes it's a lot of the times actually it's way over my head, so I need an engineer support. One of our awesome gameplay engineers be like, hey, can you make me this system so that I can make it sound. A big one of that is like doors and stuff is impossible. Not impossible, uh, beyond
It's hard.
my pay scale.
Yeah.
But yeah. So it's like I every time I put a sound in, I'm trying it and trying and trying it until it breaks to see if I have to fix it. What happened to that? And sometimes we'll play through the entire game and I'll find something. I remember I found something. It was a called I call it the tiny wand glitch of for so I did something in a very specific order, and the magic when I got the magic wand, it was tiny. And I'm like, I have a tiny magic wand. And everybody's like, how the hell did you get that? And we eventually, I backtracked my steps and exactly, and when figure it out, okay, it happens specifically if you do this, this, and this, and this, and you kind of cheated a bit if you're going too fast, and then we have to do a way to they do genius coding prevented. So typically, it's like
Wow.
it's because this isn't a reality and not everything is possible. It's typically they have to figure out a way that of the stuff we have programmed in there to cheat it versus the other way around of because it's because it's not a reality. Like the walls aren't physical unless we do a checkbox that say they're physical, which is a
Right.
cool thing to think about. Like I can shoot the magic wand at the wall and the fireball will keep going until I say it's not, which is a weird
Right.
thing. But it's because this started from scratch of an empty world with gray blocks and then it became a thing. Um,
Wow. Well, you're kind of tying it back to the your specialty sound, because I imagine the sound is going to obviously be relative to the person observing it. So sounds here are going to sound very different than sounds over here. So that is one mechanic, but also you mentioned kind of the puzzle aspect would be how you play certain instruments. So what kind of research, I guess, went into, like you said, Roman instrumentation and how they're
so
played? Is there anything you can talk about
Yeah, oh
in
no, I can
regards to
talk about
that?
that. I can talk about. So in terms of gameplay, we have an instrument. Let me just double. I already mentioned it, but yeah, it's on. We have it. It's called it's a psaltery. It's a Persian instrument, but that's because it's owned by the Persian mage. So, or she's of Persian descent. I think it's her mom's Persian.
Right.
Um, one of her parents is Persian. So that's why that's in the game. That's the only. It's a tool that we constantly use in terms of Roman instruments, in the score, specifically our main title theme. Oh boy, did I get some Roman instruments. Now I did a lot of research. I could not find the issue of living the saddest part about living in the United States is we don't get access to all the cool historical stuff unless it was American history. So I did a lot of I can't call a local museum in Italy and just be like, hey, I need you to do that. And I don't know any sound designers that were there, and I don't have the budget nor resources. I didn't have the resources to be like, hey, I need you to record XYZ. It's just out of what our scope is. I did
That's the sequel. Escape from Agents Wall 2. That'll be in the sequel
you're
when you get
still
more
trapped.
time.
We made that joke recently. We're like,
Yeah.
escape from Hadrian's Wall.
You're
You forgot,
back.
thought you escaped, but the wall just kept going.
Yeah.
Let me see what it's called. There is a virtual. So a lot of the instruments I use are virtual. They're like we're so sophisticated in technology. I have access at my fingertips to full orchestras that sound almost. Is it as good as a real orchestra? No, but most of the game is all digital instruments, pretty much synthesizers, but not synthesizers. And I had one. I found one. Luckily enough, that was ancient Roman instruments. A guy pretty much sampled a bunch of Roman instruments and made them playable on a keyboard. I need to find out what they're
Wow.
called.
But yeah, if you had, I could have you share your screen, but it's not a big deal. But
Yeah, I found it's. I found. I can. I can. I'll let you know exactly the instruments we use. All right, here we go. The instruments used in game are a lot. Um, a bunch of different war horns. So, um, generic. Is it the right one? No, it's not. One moment.
it's
I
all
picked the
right.
wrong one.
Kind of right there with the jail thing. I'm not an expert in ancient jails. I'm also an expert in ancient instrumentation. So don't worry.
Yeah.
I
All right.
remember though, years ago when we had that project in my class, you made that you tried to 3D print that one instrument. I'm trying to remember what it was.
I can't remember. It was a flute.
Yeah, it was some
Um,
kind of flute. That was
so
hilarious.
I use a sound library called
Oh,
Malaventum.
I think you're muted. Sorry.
Oop, can you hear me?
Hear that? Or I'm losing my mind here.
You hear me? Yes, no?
I'm not hearing sound.
I'm not muted on my
Oh,
end.
there you are. There you go. All right, you're
Yeah,
back.
I think that was on your end. I wasn't muted.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I use a library of sounds of a virtual instrument called Malaventum Pompeii or Malaventum Pompeii. And it was a
Okay.
compilation of a Roman cornu, lituus, a
Uh-huh.
Roman tuba, an aulos, goat animal horn, goats and other
Yeah,
animal horns,
that's
flute,
actually a Greek instrument.
pan flutes, a syrinx, a timpana, a tintuabula, tin, tintunabula,
Tintinnabula.
a
Ah,
crotata,
bell.
a sistrum, and then also like swords and like metal hits and all sorts of stuff. And
Oh,
for
well,
the
yeah.
most part, it sounds gross. It sounds raw. It sounds like a lot of it's like atonal with or it's like microtonal stuff that isn't really fitting. And that's why I used it very sparingly. And I was very, very specific on where I used on the instrumentation of each instrument of each piece of music, I should say.
Right.
And so that's why the main theme, Escape from Hadrian's Wall, I wanted to be like, yeah, this is Escape from Hadrian's Wall. So when you're in the main menu, I have, oh, I'm blasting those Roman horns. They are everywhere. It's if you go to the trailer, the teaser trailer, the main theme is the theme that plays at the ends, and you can really clearly hear a lot of those horns. Um, versus
Now I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch that
yeah,
with that in mind. Like thinking that's what you put in there, as opposed to just thinking, "Wow, it sounds cool," but it's like, no, actually, Ryan had to research all that, put all that together. So that's really neat.
I also used a bunch of real instruments too. I got for the other score, I got a Norse tagelharpa, which is a three
Huh.
strings ancient um I got it custom made from an artist on or from a person on Etsy. It is a three-string drone instrument where you play like one or two of the strings and the other one's a drone. The strings instruments typically use like gut string and all this stuff, and it sounds awesome. Uh, Tons of like I got a frame drum, a little bit of Irish whistle, or I got an Irish tin whistle. Um, I think that's it for the real instruments. Besides, like I'm a cello, so cello. Um, a lot of cello. There's a lot of cello solos in here, I have to
That's
say.
great. That's
Because
because
that's
that's
my
what Connor
background.
plays.
My background, I started playing cello, I think, in the first grade. So
Yeah.
seven, I'm years old.
Yeah.
And since like my entire elementary, middle, and high school career was I was a cellist in the orchestra, and how Pinecrest's orchestra, or the high school was set up is, or and the entire school was it was strings only. It wasn't like a full band. It was separated between
Yeah.
strings and band. You know this, but the rest of the audience doesn't.
Yeah. That's right.
But because of that, um, my mind is wired for classical orchestration of strings, and that's how I think. And then I'll add everything else later. I'll add the horns and the other stuff as an afterthought. Sorry, is any of the guys that
Brass people.
sorry, brass, woodwinds, and percussion
Yeah.
people.
Brass woodwinds. Yeah. Well,
I
I
don't
mean,
care
that's
about
kind of neat because again, this is kind of what I wanted to highlight was kind of how your education kind of gave into, helped shape some of this. So your interest in music has been a big part of this. And of course, your interest in Latin and taking Latin is going to factor into that as well. I think it's totally cool that you have, I mean, obviously an opportunity to just work in the game industry, period. And then to do a VR game is amazing. The fact that it actually is taking place in ancient Rome or in a Roman kind of event, I think is really cool. And it says a lot, I think, for, as a Latin slash Roman history dork, it says a lot about, I think, the potentiality for that subject matter kind of moving into that space as well, moving forward, that there's still interest in it. But how much of like, your interest in Latin, ancient history, music, how did all of that kind of shape some of your approaches here? And talk a little bit about that if you can.
I'll start with um when I was first like interviewed for the project by Jim, I think part of the reason I got it was I love, me, I love ancient Rome. It's my favorite. I'm a nerd about it. I love Latin. Am I good at it anymore? No. Do I know
We'll
most of
work
it?
on that. We'll fix
We'll
that.
work on that. Can I pronounce everything like I was a native speaker? Yes, I'm still
Of
phenomenal
course.
at pronunciation.
Exactly.
That was my strongest part, and I'll live and I'll die by that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I still love studying and learning about Rome. Anytime I'll find an awesome fact, I memorize it because I'm like, that is so cool. Um, and I think that's what helped me because I'm like, oh my God. He's like, do you know what Hadrian's Wall is? Because most Americans don't know about it because it's not really like a big thing. Versus like if you're in England, it's like
It's
that
right there.
you went to field trips there,
Right.
apparently.
Yeah.
Like when we were hiring actors, which is something I was in charge of initially, uh, our we hired three actors for the character for the different voice lines. I did use the voice acting, so you'll see. Um, at the beginning,
All right.
I play the Roman guards. But our two female leads, Katrine and Adhan, were American, doing British accents, but Marius was in London, I believe. An awesome, very, very talented actor named Jason Hall. And when we were talking to him initially and hired him, we're like, "Oh, do you know what Hadrian's Wall is?" He said, "Yeah, of course." But the other actors and everyone else on the team were like, "No," except for me. I knew what Hadrian's Wall was because I liked Rome and I knew who Hadrian was. Which and since I've kind of been the I don't want to say the grammar police because I didn't do any writing, but I've been the pronunciation police, and it's kind of fell off the wayside. Originally, it was Marius, Adhan, Katrin, like we were doing all the things. It was Oculus Magicae and all this stuff, but we
Right.
eventually changed it mainly because this is not what normal, most people are gonna be like, what the heck? Um,
Right.
so it became Oculus Magicae, Adhan, Katrin. I think it's still and Marius, but each person has their so like actually each person has their different pronunciations a little bit. It's I think it's purpose. I think we purposely left it everywhere because as long as each character was pronouncing it correctly each time, that's what we're going for. Obviously, the Roman person's gonna, they're all speaking English. The Roman person's gonna, he has a British accent because, you know, obviously,
Right.
the person in ancient Rome,
The old trope. Yeah.
but it's mainly because it's an audience thing. The Roman
Yeah.
guards, I did a Roman accent. I made something up. Because I spoke English. It was very, very difficult. But you'll see. My cameo. But yeah, so like, pronunciation was a big thing. Um, and it ended up going different directions. And but I didn't write anything, so I'm not gonna say anything about the grammar. Except for the I know I can't say anything about uh what I want, but there's
Spoilers. So,
something
right.
that recently-ish for later it's not in the demo, but for later in the game, there's a device that I had an idea and came up with, and they're like, yeah, it's actually a great idea of one of the many tools we can use that the player can use to progress the game. And I made sure the grammar was perfect, and it's a great name, and I'll tell you about it when it eventually is.
Right.
But
When
I
I
was talking
play
about
it.
that. But yeah, for the most part, when in terms of like actual like in game influence, I'm forgetting what the original question was, but because I went on a rant. But
Well, yeah, it's just basically how your education, how your background kind of
yeah,
shaped your
yeah.
approach to the project.
Yeah, so I used my Roman knowledge of like I remember like for Marius's clothes, I was really like when we had a concept artist, I went straight up like I'm like it's not very accurate, but it looks cool at the end of the day.
Right.
He's a main character. Main characters shouldn't look like normal Roman guards. And I said
Right.
like
Stand out.
and the thing is because he actually, he is historically accurate, and I'll tell you why. Because, for the there's like auxiliary. I forget his exact backstory. If he was, he's not. I don't think he's naturally born Roman. I'll double check. Um, he's stationed there, but he's thousands of miles away from Rome, and they didn't have. And I actually did research on this to make sure I was right. They didn't have like they're like by the time of 402 AD and that far away from from Italia, from Rome, from the heart of the empire,
Hmm.
they didn't have standardized uniforms. It was
Right.
like what you see is what you get, especially in wartime, especially you're on an island, you're on the island of Britannia.
Yeah.
They got what they had. So um a key thing for his character, I'm like it was I give it a decent thumbs up of historically accurate. He did have a crest on his head, but I think it was more only because
Right.
we needed to stand out that he is a Roman guard. He's Roman.
Right. For me, I don't, I mean, I know there's going to be people, oh, it's the wrong, decade, whatever. But for me, I think it's important just to have it as a subject matter that people can look at and kind of imagine, because your average audience, even an advanced audience in terms of Roman historical knowledge, is probably going to not be so obsessive over those kind of minute details. But I think it's an interesting idea you're talking about, and that is that where's the cutoff, right? We want to be accurate. Do we have to be exactly 100% historically accurate? Or can we have some leeway in terms of imagining the character and the look and all that? I think that's totally fine.
Yeah.
I know there's going to be people who might disagree, but
There's
I
a
think
lot of
that's great.
there's a lot of give and take you have to do, especially like a good recent example of the new God of War games. They take place in Norse mythology, so it's like yeah, there's Norse stuff, but it's all obviously, but it's a lot of mythology. So it's like what level do we get to fantasy, and what level do you get to realism and real life? But at the end of the game, it's a video game. It's not real. this is the world that we
Yeah,
crafted based off of
yeah,
reality. But there's also magic wands and magic missiles and monsters
yeah,
and all stuff.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. So you can't really get too bent out of shape when it's kind of a fantasy driven story as well, which I think is really cool. One of my favorite movies is The 13th Warrior. I don't know if you saw that. It was based on a book of Michael Crichton. Antonio Banderas plays the main character. It's set, if I remember, it's set in kind of British, Rome. There's a bunch of Vikings, and Antonio Banderas' character is a if I remember correctly, he's a Roman character. But the idea is that they have this kind of supernatural kind of force that they fight against, right? So to have that kind of sword and sandals epic adventure set in this kind of fantasy world, there's not enough of that, in my opinion. I mean, you think of the Wrath of the Titans or something like that, right? A Clash of the Titans, rather. That's one, but to have that as a kind of a story, I think is really cool and really, builds on some of the other interests that people have in general. Like obviously Harry Potter uses Latin, but then you got Percy Jackson, which is taking mythological stories and kind of putting them in a modern setting. There's a lot of interest in that, so I think it's great. Now, in terms of where to get the game, where I mean, Escape from Agent's Wall. I guess it's on Steam. Where is that? Where you get
yeah,
it,
so
or
right now, the demo, you can wish list it and wish list the full game now on Steam to keep it in your notifications and know when it goes on sale. But right now the demo will release on Steam for all VR platforms using Steam VR uh, in October 16th. And then later, I think in November, it's going to go on the Oculus, the Meta Store. So it'll go on the Oculus. So if you have Oculus Quest, so
just in time for Christmas? Yeah,
doing
or
it completely,
Saturnalia,
it is
rather.
it is free. So you don't. It's a gift. It's a gift.
It's an easy gift, an easy purchase. Well, that's cool. Is there anything else you want to say about this, Ryan? This is an amazing project. I'm actually gonna have to try and get an Oculus or something myself and mess around just to play it. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Keep asking away. I got time. Ask your questions.
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't have any other questions for you right now, but I guess that's pretty much it. I mean, I think it's a great project. I really like the idea that you said that Jim Gray Productions.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the idea of a multi-generational game. I mean, I think that's a great idea because I think we need a little bit more of that. I mean, being a father myself, I've played video games with my dad, but my dad's unusual. He likes video games. And we've played where Connor, my son, and my dad, and me, and even my nephew, Kane, have played games together. So I think it's a great thing for people to kind of as a goal, as a company. I think it's great. And the fact that it's set in ancient Rome is just making it really cool. So
I want
shout out to you guys. Awesome job.
One thing I want to mention of an Easter egg I wanted to put in the game, it got cut or didn't make it because my boss thought it was a little bit too niche of a line. So you get this bottle that you can fill up with liquids, and there's multiple uses and a bunch of different puzzles. The first time, but there's an Easter egg that if you try drinking it, because a lot of our players try drinking it, um, Marius pops up occasionally in like a magical portal to give you hints. He's the guy helping you, guiding your way. And if you try drinking it, he goes like, "What the heck? What are you doing? Like, do you normally just drink random liquids?"
Random
And,
fluids, yeah.
there's a couple of different, and if you keep doing it, he just keeps like harassing you. And I wanted one of the lines be like, it had something I forget the exact line, but I'm like, I know we're used to drinking garum, but trust me, this is not garum. And he's like, and my boss is like, I get it, you want it, and it's good, but it's like I might be a little bit too niche. But shout out
A
to
little bit too on the nose, right? Oh, garum. Yeah, the fish sauce of ancient Rome.
I'm trying
Oh
to think of
boy.
other
Yeah.
Latin Roman reference. I mean, there's a lot. You're gonna have to play the
Yeah.
game, but there's a lot
Play
of
the
things.
game to find
Play the game.
out. And then everybody can share their favorite moments, out with us and
Or how long it took you
comment
to
down below.
figure out the
Yeah.
puzzles.
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about too, is
There's
the
a
puzzles, how they work.
there's a hint system. That's actually a very interesting point of I'd never work on a puzzle game. It's not an easy thing because our main thing with playtests that we did wasn't for, I mean, obviously finding bugs, seeing how people reacted, but our main thing was seeing how long it took people to start the puzzle, figure out the puzzle, complete the puzzle, and figuring out what hints we need to place. What is something that everyone got stuck on? Is the puzzle just straight up too hard? Um, so that was something I never expected, but something we had to do of like a really robust hint system of what do people players need help with? Because there is a hint system if you need
Uh,
help. Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially depending on the age level, right? If you have a younger player versus an older, more experienced player,
Not even
you
that.
know,
It's like, it's also like how often do they play video games? How often do they play VR? How often do they play escape rooms and puzzle games? Um, like my brother was actually one of the play testers because he didn't doesn't play video games. He plays Call of Duty on his phone. Um,
right? Oh
even
boy,
even then he's like the last even when he used to play video games when he was young when he was like a teenager, he played shooters, he played Call of Duty and other games like that. He played Halo. He wasn't playing escape rooms. He wasn't playing puzzle game or there wasn't escape room games. He wasn't playing puzzle games. He wasn't
right.
playing strategy games. So he was a perfect candidate of doesn't own VR, doesn't play video games. Does he like it? And did he figure out the puzzles? And he got through the entire our entire demo and he loved it. Just saying it. So it's very fun. You all love it, except if you
So
don't like.
that's awesome because I mean, you could when you do escape from Mage's Wall 2, we'll throw in some Latin, make students have to conjugate verbs from the indicative and the subjunctive, and
So,
can't be able to escape that way.
somewhere down the line, and I don't know if I'm not going to confirm it's going to make it in the final thing, but I definitely said to my boss, I'm like, can we do a version that's like fully dubbed in Latin of like a Latin, a localized Latin version?
Yeah,
You know, games get localized in other languages.
yeah.
Let's do a realistic one. Everyone's speaking Latin. Um,
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that'd be awesome because the other thing is if the dialogue doesn't play a major role in kind of driving the story, but it just kind of becomes like a part of the atmosphere, it would be really neat. But it'd also be neat to have it so you have to actually figure out what the Latin's saying to advance in the story as
there,
well. That
there
might be
is there is there is Latin in the game.
uh,
Specifically, actually, this is a good point if you edited it on top of the picture of the one of the puzzles. Um,
yeah.
oh wait, I can share my screen, right?
Yeah, you can share, I think, right?
Yeah. Let me double check. If I share, there we go. See this? Um, you see my screen?
Yeah. Yep, yep.
Very small. Oh, here we go. So this is one of the puzzles. I'm not going to explain everything you do in the puzzle, but it's a giant map of Britain or Britannia, the Isle of Britannia, and
Okay,
you can't see it right here, but it might be cardinal directions in Latin.
okay.
It's not the. It's actually not the normal cardinal directions. It says like to the east. It's like I don't know when they wrote it. I don't know what they decided, but it's like it means like to the east, to the north, to the
Right.
west, instead of just
So
north south.
usually right, septentriones and oriens and occidens and
I think one of
meridians,
them is
right?
like
Definitely.
this one is like Auster, Auster.
Okay, so that's a wind actually. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, so yeah, I could
Yeah.
or I noticed that when I played it, I'm like Oriens is not. I'm like I always remembered east because Oriental it means to the east.
Exactly.
So
The
I'm like
sun rises. Yeah.
yeah. So I was always when it wasn't that I'm like what does this mean? So I actually learned Latin from playing the game.
That's good. All
We
right.
love
Well, that's all I got for you. So thank you, Ryan. We're looking forward to it. I'm definitely gonna have to get some kind of VR set. I might have to bite the bullet and get like the Meta Oculus or
I think
whatever.
the meta
Um,
quests how much are the meta quests? I think they start at 5. The meta quest 3, the newest one starts at 500. The two,
that's not
which you
too
can play
bad.
the game on 380, 382. You can get them used 300.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, they start at 300.
that's cool.
You only need like
That's
5
cool.
gigs too, so it's not a
Oh
really
yeah.
heavy. This isn't Call of Duty that's going to take 200 gigabytes of your hard drive.
Jeez, yeah. Well, thank thank the gods for that. All right. Well, thank you very much, Ryan. I'm gonna go ahead and sign us off here. So salute omnes and see you guys online. Leave a comment, subscribe. I'm just kidding. Uh, But thanks again, Ryan. I'll talk to you later. Let me go ahead and stop this recording.